I remember driving across the Coronado Bridge one day, and it just dropped on me like a warm blanket that there's got to be another way to exist and excel in life other than using fear as the gasoline in my gas tank. What if I started to use love as the gas in my gas tank? That there is another way to motivate and push and fuel yourself other than through fear, shame, confining.
Hello and welcome to the Mindfulness Experience Podcast. I'm Keith Fiveson. We're an official Wonderland Miami 2023 conference media partner. Remember to sign up with Mindfulness 20 for a 20% discount on the standard registration fee. I'm your host today, and I have the privilege of welcoming Diego, a former Navy SEAL who has embarked on a journey to help individuals and teams become better leaders through psychedelic medicine. Diego's company, the Trident Approach, is sharing the knowledge and insights he's gained over his 2-decade-long career in the SEAL teams, combined with his most profound reflections from the use of psychedelics. Diego's talk at the Wonderland Miami 2023 conference is set to focus on consciousness in leadership and flow state in teams, key concepts that every leader must understand to unleash the potential of their teams. The conference is set to host some of the best minds in the industry, and Diego's contributions promise to add a unique perspective to the discussions. All right. Mr. Diego Ugalde, how are you today, sir?
Fantastic. Thank you, Keith. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. You're on the West Coast this morning, and thank you for joining and chilling and being here. You got your coffee. I got some water, so I think we're good, right?
Yeah, man.
All right. So listen, you and I certainly share an Army background, and I noticed that you were a little early, and that is a certain value that I hold. That if you're not early, you're late. So you got to be a little early. What inspired you? Given your Army background and leadership, and how did your experience with the Navy SEALs really help you with your current pursuits? Because we've got this military background. I'm Army, you're Navy. Clearly, we can go ahead and play football. Maybe not nicely, but we can play football. It's all right, even though there's a fierce competition there. But you brought this from your Navy career and your Navy SEALs career, right? You brought this into your leadership focus. So what does that look like, and how does it manifest itself in the psychedelic realm? What are you going to do down in Miami?
Yeah, so that's a lot. So the how we chose to focus on leadership came from we just continually were receiving questions from executives and athletes when I was active duty in the SEAL teams, which is, how's it that you work and communicate so well together? And I got asked that question so often that when I was kind of coming up on the twilight of my career and I was looking at where I was going to transition into, I was like, man, how about we start a company that just focuses on answering that question, but not only answering that question. At the time, I found myself also adding things that I knew that we didn't do very well in the SEAL teams, and things like empathy and compassion. So yeah, it seemed kind of like a dream setup for me. So that's what we did. And we were in operations for about a year. I retired in May of 2018. We started pretty much right after that. We were in operation for about a year. And then where psychedelics come into the picture, because they were not there at all. I had one of my Pathfinders tell me, hey, Diego, I'm not going to be able to show up to work next week. There's an organization that takes Navy SEALs down to Mexico and treats them with psychedelics. It was strange because I I had never heard of psychedelics being used in that context. For me, they were always just about, just doing drugs kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was shocked, but at the same time, I knew this guy was smacked up pretty good with PTS, addiction and depression. And so I was like, yeah, man, hey, what do you do? Whatever you got to do. Can't wait to see you back here.
Mm-hmm.
So
what organization was that, Diego?
So that was the Mission Within with Dr. Martin Polanco, and it was funded at the time through Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, and that's an amazing organization founded by Marcus and Amber Capone.
Right.
Those
solid
two
people.
Yeah, they're directly responsible for saving lives, period. There's just no way around it. Many lives. And so at any rate, when he came back, he was completely transformed. I had to know what was going on, because one of the things I was also considering doing coming out of the military was becoming a PsyD to counsel veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress. So I was really intrigued and interested in what was going on here. So long story short, I went down there after seeing his transformation. I ended up going through the medicine myself, become a psychedelic integration coach, and I've sat and held space with over 200 veterans at this point, going through Ibogaine, 5-MeO, DMT, ayahuasca, psilocybin. But anyway, as I was going through the process, because the Trident approach was essentially my baby, any business owner can tell you, like, man, this is just like an extension. It is part of the family. All I could see were all these connections between leadership with psychedelics. And so now, essentially, to kind of fully round out your question, that's what the Trident approach has become. It's our best lessons learned from our time in the SEAL teams, and our deepest insights from psychedelic exploration as they pertain to leadership and teams.
Excellent. So when we start taking a look at your ability to bring that vision, that ability to really look beyond, to have an aspirational quality towards the work, you're really looking at, what is it where have you been? Where are you now? Where do you want to go? And then from the viewpoint of bringing that experience into the psychedelic work, you're able to go ahead and help individuals really kind of get out of their unbundle, if you will, and start to heal.
Yeah. Healing is such a huge component of psychedelics, and I think it gets talked about a lot, and for good reason. And I think equally, there's just so much learning that goes on too. It's incredible. So looking at psychedelics from the perspective of healing, or being a healer, and also being a teacher, is just, I think, is just huge. And I feel like I was born in the exact right time I needed to be. Because if I was born any other time before this, I wouldn't be here. So lucky to be able to learn and heal through these modalities, for sure.
That's beautiful. Now, you and I talked briefly before we got on the show, and you said that you're certainly familiar with the Heroic Hearts Project, and you're a part of, you're an ambassador. You're working with them as well. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, I'm just celebrating my year anniversary. So just over a year ago, the CEO, Jesse Gould, and Jared Reinhardt, head of coaching, they called me up one day and they said, "Hey man, are you interested in coming on work with us as a psychedelic integration coach?" And I was like, well, totally, but I don't have any experience with ayahuasca, and I've never been to Peru. And they're like, "Well, what are you doing in September?" And I'm like, going to Peru to do some ayahuasca, bro. So let's do it. And
that's great.
So I did my first sitting with them, and it was amazing because up to that point, my experiences have been limited. I say, I had only experienced Ibogaine and 5-MeO and psilocybin, and ayahuasca is its own thing, and for sure, I've never Not that this has anything to do with your question. I'm just saying I've never felt a connection to a medicine like I have with ayahuasca. I felt protected. I felt like it was my jam. I felt like we kind of understood each other, sort of thing.
Grandmother was with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. People say I've never experienced the female energy of ayahuasca that people talk about. To me, it seemed I'll answer you saying yes, but it's not in my experience to understand what you mean when you say that. But
well, that's like the term, right? Grandmother. It's used as a term for an ayahuasca ceremony, right?
Yeah, for sure. They say it's got this very heavy matriarchal energy to it, which I don't understand personally. I can accept it. I believe people when they say it, but it hasn't been in my experience to experience that.
But you said you felt held. That's sort of what triggered it for me. And I'm wondering, when you talk about your own journey and your journey towards seeking self-awareness, I'm wondering, how that's impacted you and, your overall philosophy, if you will.
Well, huge. For example, I didn't know that I had an ego until I did Ibogaine. I never, even as a SEAL, I never walked into the room thinking I was better than anybody. And so to me, with my limited understanding of what the ego is, I'm like, well, I don't need to worry about that. I need to worry about other things. Meanwhile,
your ego is in the back room saying, "Oh, I've got it."
Excellent.
They will be mine.
Mr. Burns and Simpson. Yeah, it's like totally. I joke. I've come to a different understanding and a very, very, I think, maybe my ego's laughing again, but I think a really good relationship with my ego. Now I see it as the great teacher, but before, oh my gosh. I didn't even know. So I was going through life for sure disconnected, and for sure completely oblivious. And all these limiting factors, there was all these limitations that were coming from within me, that I just was completely ignorant of. And then so what psychedelics helped me do was saying, hey man, it doesn't have to be this way if you don't want it to be. And sometimes it was really funny like that, and sometimes it was heavy, hard, like there was no joking. It was just like, just a hammer dropping in my face, and other times it was really nurturing and patient. You know how it is, so so by learning a deeper awareness of not only the components within the self, but also I don't know, maybe perhaps some of the workings of existence itself that I was completely oblivious to. I'm not saying that I know anything, because I don't, but all I'm saying is that it was showing me things that I'd never thought to consider that seemed at least closer to truth than any truth that I'd ever known. So now kind of playing with these new parameters and this new equipment, it launched my life in a lot of ways. And so I can only, one of the more common things that people say is, dude, you realize you're on drugs, right? and all I can say is, man, all I can say is, if there is a truth that I align with the most, it's when I'm in the medicine. It's like, that is true to me. And what helps me, it's not like putting on the blinders, being like, oh, this is the way that I'm choosing, this is the way that I want. What's helping me align with it is that I'm just more at peace. And even in the midst of chaos, things don't bother me. Like, they genuinely, like, I'm not saying, okay, I can't let this bother me. This is not the case. Like, there are some really big things, like some of the biggest things in my life, that used to just instantly spin me out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, oh shoot, that happened a couple of days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So that,
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know truth
Mm-hmm.
really, but
Mm.
all I
So
can say is that it's yes, yeah.
So this whole idea of meaning, making meaning, and really then seeing the storylines and being able to kind of look, behind the curtain and really uncover, a lot of the truth around what's going on and who we are and where we are, and we're all interconnected in this sort of energy goo, if you will. I think is wonderful. And then sort of looking at the various parts that we play, and the various, pieces that make up who we are, and being able to step away from the vehicle and examine those parts and how we move into the world. It sounds like you've really gotten a more traction with that, and certainly a better view of the world than maybe the everyday pieces. How do you apply that towards your leadership philosophy? I know you've got, this Trident approach. There are various principles with the Trident approach, and I'm wondering how that implements and really applies itself using your experience now with the medicine and your philosophy in terms of bringing that into the world, and then working with teams, and how individuals might benefit in terms of performance or productivity.
Yeah, so one of the key reasons why I ultimately chose to go the path of the Trident approach was, even though there was so much I didn't understand, I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew that the common path for success in life in our culture, essentially the rat race, is essentially the rat race. Fear-based, ego-driven, all of that stuff. It just didn't feel right to me. It felt like, I remember driving across the Coronado Bridge one day between the island of Coronado and San Diego, kind of where we train, and it just dropped on me like a warm blanket that there's got to be another way to exist and excel in life other than using fear as the gasoline in my gas tank. You start to think about that water test where you hold a glass of water and say, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then you take that and you put it under the microscope, and there's these beautiful snowflake-like, shapes
the
and
molecular
patterns.
structure, and the patterns, the crystalline patterns. Yeah.
And the exact opposite is true when you sit there and you hold the glass and you say, all these terrible things about it, disaggregate it. It's all, it's ugly is what it is. And so, I've heard everything between 60 and 80% of our body is composed of water. So what if I started to use love as the gas in my gas tank? And so that's kind of where the Trident approach came. And so that's why we did that, because it was just like, man, everybody's using, well, not everybody, but it seems like that's getting the most traction of like, hey, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen to you, or you're never going to be this. So if you want to be an elite performer, like, you've got to, I've run through broken bones. It took me 10 years to even make it through SEAL training. It takes most people like 6 months. So I've done all of this stuff that people are telling me, but I'm telling you, man, I got to the end of it. I'm like, this cannot be it. Like, if anybody should have been happy or proud or whatever, or what they did, like, it should have been me, but I wasn't. I was like empty. Like, how could that be? And so anyway,
so how do the principles change that paradigm?
Yeah, we show them a different way, that there is another way to motivate and push and fuel yourself other than through fear, shame, confining, the illusion of success. And I think one of the reasons why we resonate so well with people is because a lot of the people that are coming to us being like, hey, I've dominated in the business world, I've dominated in the athletic world, I've done all this, but it's not enough. Why is that kind of thing? And so when they look at sort of our approach, they see, oh, like, there's there's a whole other mountain to climb.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they see that you can switch fear for love, when you can switch like these confining thoughts to vibrancy and openness, and that with the rat race, it's never enough. But with this conscious path, there's always more. It's just this little tiny tweak that we shift, and it opens up everything. And by the way, it's super healthy and super vibrant. So you're not running because you're ashamed of yourself. You're running because you get to, and it makes you feel good when you're finished. And even during the time, you're doing the same thing. Yeah.
So, we hear about, the McGregor theory X, theory Y, style of management, the carrot and the stick versus, the incentive, the empowerment, if you will, the trust, empowerment that's there. And I'm wondering, when you start looking at it from the individual contributor, the individual that really may come to work or may come into their life with, a whole strip of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, shame, anger, whatever comes from that, right? And you're really talking about approaching that in a very different way. I'm wondering, a lot of people listening might think, well, that sounds very hippie, that sounds very woo-woo, because maybe that's the only way they can rationalize that in their minds.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me that your approach is quite different. And I'm wondering, when you look at leaders being able to leverage consciousness and a deeper, having a deeper understanding of their teams and being able to foster an environment of trust and support using some of the principles that you have, what does that look like? What are there certain words? Are there certain spirit de corps? Are there certain community exercises, experiential exercises? What goes on? And, how do you foster that sense of belonging that you kind of talk to? Because in many organizations, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, chasing the carrot, being on the treadmill, all of those things that you've talked about, fighting the competition, having all of that in place is very, very real. And it's still alive, even though we're, talking the talk, not necessarily everyone's walking the walk.
Yeah, it's funny when you're talking about the resistance from people, and it's funny to think about what we fight to protect. And I often notice that people fight to protect things that make no. Should I break now? Yeah. I'll keep going. That's what you were talking about before. Okay. All right. Yeah. So one of the things that we're talking about fighting to protect is people have an innate understanding, something that's deeper within them that they know doesn't work. But just because it's the way we always do things, it's like, hey, it's almost like, most of the people listening to this podcast totally understand the whole idea of our current approach to mental health. And when you introduce psychedelics into the equation, you're talking about, how could you do that? That's dangerous. That's a dangerous thing. But wait a minute, like where you're trying to protect this whole idea of mental health, which doesn't work. What are you trying to fight to protect? So when people have, hey, you can't do that, this and that, whatever. It's like, what are you trying to? Our culture, in a lot of ways, especially as it pertains to leadership, we all understand that it's defunct. I mean, so what are we trying to fight to protect? So you're asking, how do we foster like this sense of belonging?
Yeah, because there's this mental health crisis, and people are going, disengaged. They're going into work, they're going into their lives, they're not able to cope, and they're, many of them are disengaged. They don't feel like they're empowered.
Yeah. So what we do is we kind of flip the script. I think we put them instant. So we do a couple of things. One, we take people out on the beach and we put them through like what on the outside looks like Navy SEAL training a little bit, but it's very far from it from internally. We do keynote speeches. We do coaching, both executive athletes and team coaching. But one of the things that we do on the beach is we immediately put them in the situations that they're unfamiliar with. And one of the things that we start out by doing is we become like super vulnerable instantaneously on our side. Mm-hmm. And what that does, you can see the look in their faces like, oh, I didn't realize that this is what it was going to be like. But what it does is it inspires them almost.
What do you mean by vulnerable? What does that mean?
Well, because people have this idea that Navy SEALs, or whatever it is their idea is, well, we're happy to do, and what we're sort of obliged to do is show the humanness behind who we are. Like, they're not standing in front of like these, whatever it is they think they're standing in front of. They're standing in front of human beings just like they are. We are just like everyone else. We do things better than some, and we need a lot of help in a lot of areas that others don't, you know? So I think when they see that humanity, and because what we're trying to do is lower the threshold of like, well, I've got to be this way in order. No, you just be you. And so what we are is we are just ourselves. And like, hey, this is kind of where I'm at in the process of life. These are the things that I'm good at, and these are the things that I'm struggling with. And I'm happy to be here and just show up with you all as I am. And you guys are going to help me get better today. And we go down the line for all the Pathfinders that are there. And then it's like, then we look to the first participant to our right and say, what are you working on? And after they just heard a bunch of Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Marine Rangers and or Army Rangers and Marine Scouts and all Scout Raiders say all this stuff that they're working on, they're like, well, you know what I'm working on? I'm working on communication because, you know, and then it goes down the line and all of a sudden the CEO says, I don't know how to trust, you know, and then, okay, now we can train. Now we can start, because without doing that, people have this, I can't show this, and nothing changes like at all when they do that. Yeah.
How long are these weekends that you're, I mean, is it just a weekend, or do you do longer sessions, or what does that look like in terms of time wise?
You know, our shorter programs are 4 hours long. Our longer programs can last over a year. It just kind of really depends. You know, so for example, we can just do the beach sessions. Are the intent behind the beach sessions, one of them was to create psychedelic-like experiences without the medicine, because, you know, psychedelics are illegal. So it turns out that we did a super good job at that. And so what ends up happening now is that it's required for us to do pre-coaching, and they do the event, and then we have to do integration coaching afterwards, because the events are so powerful that sometimes people don't know what to do with themselves when they're done. For example, people are ashamed sometimes of how they perform, how they lead, how they communicate when they're under stress. And so, which is, you know, some things that psychedelics are absolutely capable of doing. And so there is an integration place that's necessary in order for them to help them land safely and then continue on with their work. So that's the shorter. The longer one is, you know, we do coaching every week. And every 6 months we'll do a beach event and see where they've grown. And also we have the ability, and we have some really strong and powerful relationships with incredible people who do the medicine. So we can take them down to Peru, we can take them down to Mexico, and they can, you know, receive the medicine from shamans and healers that have been passing this stuff down for dozens of generations to help them in their perspective of understanding where they are as leaders. And their relationship with themselves. So yeah.
Wow. I you know, it sounds really good. Like you know, this is the ability to get cracked open and kind of go inside and, you know, see where the yolk is, and to be able to yoke that and kind of bring that up to the surface. And then the integration, I think, is so important, because, you know, if you don't want to, you want to be able to use what's there, and you want to bring it into your heart, you want to bring it into your way of being, rather than just kind of be left cracked open, you know. So it's great that you're doing this work. It's just beautiful. Yeah,
and that's not something we do. They show up with the ability. We don't go around.
Yeah, they do the work. They do the work. You provide the format. Yeah,
we're pathfinders.
Beautiful.
We just stand with you as you find your way. We're not instructors. We don't teach people. We don't make people do things they don't want to do.
But it's all the container, right? I mean, you're creating this wonderful, safe container. You're going through process. You're going through experience, and you're showing that, hey, it's okay. You're safe here, and you can show who you are. And that's, isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah, it is. We have this an amazing story that I love so much. We were in training, University of Georgia, and they had a game coming up, and I could tell that one of the players was completely disengaged, even though it was like game day. And I was like, so we brought the whole team together, and we're like, hey, what's going on? And all of a sudden he raised his hand and he turned around and he faced his teammates while he was still sort of looking at the ground. And he said, my cousin was murdered 3 days ago or 2 days ago. And no one knew. Like, I looked around the whole sea of faces and everyone was in shock. Even the coaching staff was shocked. And so we ended up working through that stuff. They ended up playing the game that night. They won or whatever, but he came up to me. He's like, man, I want to thank you so much for giving me the courage to say that. I'm like, that was all you. The only thing we did was provide the space and time to your point is the container. And I think there's some real importance in mentioning that those are the kind of spaces that not us, but what leaders need to create within their organization so that people have the ability to open up and say, things are not okay right now. That's another thing with the rat race. It's just like, hey, bury that stuff down. I don't have time to think about it. I can't.
Suit up, show up, shut up, do your work, complain later. Yeah,
100%. Which is complete, like the life bloodline of the military.
Exactly. Suit up, show up, shut up, complain later.
Which is why we're so busy with Heroic Hearts Project, because people are finally breaking after just shoving so much and ignoring so much. And it's like, man, if we give these people the container and the time and the space to release that stuff in a loving way, in a supported way, in a place where they know they can trust, life is just easier in the long run. It's healthier in the long run. They're more resilient in the long run. So
yeah, but that's not macho, man. Come on. That's like not a macho thing, right? I mean, I'm wondering where, like how much of this is toxic, and I'll use that term, toxic masculinity, versus the ability to recognize where a true leader is, which is a heart-mind connection, right? A heart-mind vulnerability, the ability to lead from the heart and the mind, to connect both of them together, to go ahead and see people and to appreciate what their experiences are. And I think that's what the medicine does in terms of giving us that circumspect or that ability to crawl out of ourselves and give ourselves some compassion. And I'm wondering your thoughts about that in terms of working with leaders that may be perhaps a little resistant, or people that might come in with a toxic masculinity perspective, or or for that matter, women that might be attending that might have been hurt through the process of toxic masculinity. Yeah.
Well, we're all, as far as I can tell, we're all doing the very, very best we can. And so when you're growing up in life, and for example, if you are unaware of what the ego is and how it manifests and all that stuff, you have this thought, you work towards it, you get some sort of success, and boom, that's the way things need to be. And so you do that over and over again enough times in life, and it's like, okay, this just is the way. And so this whole idea of toxic masculinity, or at least in the context that we're talking about it, is, there's a reward that's there. And so we keep achieving those rewards, and who can blame us?
Right. Suit up, show up, shut up, complain later.
And so I'm always on time. I'm always squared away. My evaluations at the end of the year are always good. I earn my war medals. I get this, I get that, whatever. So I'm obviously doing something right.
Right.
I can't blame people for aligning with that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
with psychedelics and with the unveiling of the ego in my own experience, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm literally feeding this thing that if I let it, will absolutely kill me. Not metaphorically speaking, not, it really, two of my brothers died from drinking, and because they didn't understand ego. And if they did, it would have been, it could have been, who knows, doesn't matter. But the point is,
it's a storyline, right? I mean, this is your storyline. You change your story, you change your life. I mean, that's what it gives you the opportunity for. I mean, the medicine gives you the opportunity to look at what that story is and whether or not it's real.
Yeah. And you were talking about how women kind of suffer at the feet of this. Not only do they suffer from this, whatever it is, in the I think probably the common understanding, but another way they suffer in this is because they're like, well, if I don't perform in this way, then I'm going to be irrelevant. So then they start to take on these toxic things so that they can be successful in their own right, because this is the game, this is the way it's played, these are the rules, and if they want to stand out, if they want to excel, if they want to get their promotion, all that, they just like men have to leave things that there's something deep within them that knows that this is not the way, but they have to abandon it if they want to be successful. Women are not alone in this. I cannot tell you how many times it has just been the space between me and some elite level special operations operator who said, I just don't want to do it, but this is how it is. Right. So there is a knowing within us that understands that this rat race is not the way, but we don't know how to go about doing it. And that's why I love what we do. Because here, try this way out, because it can be super cool for yourself. And not only for you, but man, your relationships and the world around you, can absolutely transform when you start to find the deeper truth and align to vibrancy.
So it's wonderful that you're doing this work and, using the Trident approach and using the medicine as a way to unhook from the storylines and or the toxic environments that might ensue from people not, seeing, hearing, recognizing, listening, and really appreciating the uniqueness or the storyline or the emotional complexities that happen with individuals, because those dynamics, like the story you told of the fellow who's it was his brother, his cousin who died, right? So, within that context, we're able to go out. He was freed himself, left that story behind, and was able to work with the team camaraderie.
Camaraderie, yeah.
So I'm just wondering, if you have other examples of teamwork where you've gone in and you've worked with some of the principles using the Trident approach or any other approach where you've really helped them to achieve greater success. If you have maybe a story or something along that line, maybe an individual or small team or what have you.
Yeah. So as far as I know, we don't help people achieve greater things. What we do is we help them bring awareness into themselves, and whatever's within them is what goes on and achieves with that new awareness of something that already exists within them. We're not creating anything, we're not building anything, but
you move them out of disconnection, you help them to move out of disconnection, and that's their own inner guide, their own inner wisdom. They've got, as you said before, everyone has the medicine inside of them. The medicine only helps you to unlock what's already inside, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That's beautiful. So I'm, along that line though, you're still creating the space and creating the crucible that you're allowing them, or you're hoping that they take back into the world and carry that forward. So I'm just wondering if you've got some anecdotal kind of story.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it can be as simple as we were training an international timepiece company. They sell $1 million watches and that kind of thing, and they're out of Switzerland. But we were doing a global leadership training program in Muscat, Oman, which was cool. I'd never been to that country before. And we were out on the beach.
What was that? Muscat, Omano? What
Oman, the country of Oman.
Oman. Oh, wow. Yeah, cool. Right around the UAE. Beautiful.
Yeah. And so I saw this this participant. She was standing on the beach, and she was crying, which crying is very common in the Trident approach. A lot of energy movement goes on, we'll say. And just a simple thing. I walked over there. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, well, I got a swimming pool in my backyard, and I don't swim. And my kids are always asking me to come into the pool, and I just don't. But now I've been in the ocean with you guys, and that tells me that I can go in the swimming pool in my backyard. So I'm going to go home and jump in my pool. I'm like, that's awesome. And she's like, she just looked at me, and she's like, I'm going to be a better mom. And so I lost it, of course. So we just there on the beach. You know what I mean? We have all these ideas of like these designs and plans and things like that we're going to create of like what people take away or whatever. And I would have never like sat down and say, hey, how do we get these people to believe that they're better mothers? It's not about that. It's about, like you said, creating the container, seeing what happens within the container that is really massive. And another thing that we did is we have we create like these little mini Navy SEAL missions that people get to go through. And like I said, from the outside, it looks like sort of SEAL training, but from the inside, these events are specifically designed to elicit how you respond in communication, cultural alignment, building trust, and ego awareness, and how you lead and how you work as a team, all under stress. And so there are huge, gigantic takeaways that come from these things. And one of the things we had was a minefield. We had the CEO of this massive company. And the way you go through this minefield is one person is blindfolded, the other person is not. And the person who is not blindfolded it's up to them to direct the blindfolded person through the minefield. So you have to crawl, you have to kind of like, there's a lot of stuff going on. And meanwhile, we're blasting like this huge loud speaker right next to them. So it's all like really discombobulated, a lot of chaos going on.
Wow.
And anyway, the CEO had it in his mind that he was close to one of the landmines, and he starts kind of yelling at the non-blindfolded person who was way down on the pecking order of the company. He wasn't like his VP of sales or anything like that, or not even that. He was
just another human being.
Just another human being, and not quite mailroom, but pretty close to it. And he's like, "Where's my knee? Where's my knee?" And I could see this kid was almost trembling because he's got the CEO of the company there, and he knows that if the CEO hits the landmine and they've got to pay the price for that, like it felt like it was almost his career was on the line kind of thing. And I was like, hey, time out. Hey, do you have a blindfold on? And he's like, yes. He's like screaming at me. I was like, does he have a blindfold on? No. And I was like, shut up and listen to him, man. Just listen. He's gonna make sure you're okay. Just trust him. And so they ended up going through the minefield. And when he finished, which by the way, he didn't hit any landmines, he took off his blindfold and he just started crying. He's like, I don't trust anybody. And so I walked over to him and I was like, how does it feel to be a CEO of a company of 20,000 people and you don't trust any one of them? And I was like, dude, you hired these people for a reason. They've got all of this stuff. Let's start the process of seeing what this turns into. And we still talk to this day. He's talking about all the unleashing that's happening with the leaps and bounds, because he starts to actually, and it didn't have anything to do with them, just like always. You start with the self. It had to do with him. When he started to open up that gate. So those are some of the things.
And it's beautiful. That's a beautiful story, because it really does bring to heart the idea that our realities are really projections of our own internal makeup, right? I mean, when we 100%. Start looking at the world, the world is really, people are nice or bad, not because they're really nice or bad, but because, they may be doing some bad things perhaps, but what you ascribe to them or the way you look in the world, a lot of that is your own projection. Yeah, it's your own judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. Or lack of, yeah, and lack of understanding, just like
Or
the
lack
toxic
of
masculinity
understanding.
piece that you were talking about. If they
Right.
knew, if we
Right.
deeply knew
Right.
that there was another way, that's
Yeah.
the way we would all be doing stuff.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? So listen, I know we only have a few minutes, in our time together, and this, I feel like this has gone by really, really fast. And there's so much more that we could talk about. I'm wondering, you're heading down to Miami to the Wonderland Conference, November 9th through the 11th, and you're going to be giving a talk. Can you maybe talk about that? And maybe does it have something to do with your book, The Deep Mind Medicine, Navy SEALs and Elite Teams? I know that's your upcoming book. I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about that, maybe the book or your talk, or what you hope to expect, when you get down there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, leading into the deep, our book is going to be released sometime in October, probably early November. We're just finishing up copy edit process as
So
we
is the
speak.
title Leading into the Deep? Is that
Yes.
Okay, got it. Great.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. So we're excited to release that. And essentially the book is not only our perspective on leading the self and elite teams through the best of what we learned in the SEAL teams and our deepest insights from psychedelic medicine, but it also shows, my own journey of psychedelic medicine as someone coming from, again, I didn't even do this stuff, and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? How is it that stuff like healed my body so profoundly in such a short time? Even changed the skin color, for God's sakes.
Wow.
What is this? Kind of thing. So there's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of vulnerability is just the way for me, and not hiding anything. So I talk a lot about my own mistakes growing up in the SEAL teams, and my mistakes as a leader, all of these things, and then helping me shape my understanding of how I receive life as it is. And so that's what the book is about. I'm super proud of it. Our editors really helped. I think I handed them 200,000 words.
Wow.
they're like, bro,
had to chop that down. Got to bring that down. Yeah.
Totally. And so they crushed it. I'm so happy. And so we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking also about veterans and mental health with psychedelics, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, we'll be around. We're always happy to sit over coffee. And one of the comments that I think that I probably get the most from my best friends and from complete strangers is I give the best hugs. So go down a hug, man.
I'm in for that. Totally.
Oh,
A bro hug. Totally. Really, like, boom. Big bear hug. Love that.
We can even drop the bro. It's all about it's love.
It's from the heart, man. It's totally from the heart. Totally from the heart. Yeah. So let me ask you, Diego, if people want to get a hold of you or they want to find out more about your book, what do they wind up doing?
They can go to the Trident Approach.com, and there's like a bunch of tabs for like book now or something like that, and there's a drop down menu.
The TridentApproach.com. Got it.
Yeah. And my email is Diego, just like San Diego, Diego at thetridentapproach.com.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you personally, for being on the show and being with us. And I look forward to getting a hug when I'm down in Miami, man.
Oh man, here it comes. It's coming, man.
Thank you, Diego, for sharing your insights on consciousness and leadership and the flow states, and certainly the use of medicine and helping to change people from the inside out. We wish you all the best on your upcoming book, Leading into the Deep, and the Leading into the Deep and Mind Medicine as well, and hope to have you back on the show to discuss that in depth when it comes out. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe and tune into our upcoming podcast on the Wonderland Miami 2023 conference. I'm Keith. Talk to you later. Thank you for listening to the Mindfulness Experience Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. We have other exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. For more mindfulness tips and tricks, visit our website at workmindfulness.com. Thanks again for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience. This is Keith Fiveson.